Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. I am Zanuddin from 9th standard. As we all know, today is Maths Day. So upon that, I have a presentation over here. So as we all get up in the morning, what's the first thing we do? Any answers?
Watch the time.
Exactly. So as we watch the time, if I give you a situation, okay, listen carefully. It's a situation. You have not, you neither have a wristwatch nor have a clock, and you're somewhere where there's no Wi-Fi, and you sort of have to know what's the time. So what will be the consequences you will follow to consider the time? Somewhat you're on camera. Direction of the sun. Any other answers? Exactly. On the basis of these, we can measure the time, right? Before wristwatches and wall clocks, there were the same measurements as you people do. So these measurements, if we begin with the very first word or the very first situation, came from the early Egyptians. So in their part, they had a festival or a ritual which occurred once in 2737 years. 3 planets would appear on the pyramids of Giza: Mercury, Uranus and Saturn. They would align in such a way that they would have a consequence or a situation in which the Egyptians thought that this was a sign from their god, Amun-Ra, the highest positioning god. So this is how the very first timings started. One more invention they did was the sundial. Sundial came in 2 types. One was huge, as shown here, and one was a handful size, made of iron. So this was the very first clock. It had an isosceles triangle on it, a flat circle surface. On that, an isosceles triangle. When the sun rays would come down to that triangle, it would show shadows and then it would measure the exact time of that place. The next invention what the Egyptians did was the obelisk. This was something like a tower placed in an open field. So when the sun rays would fall on it, it would change its shadow as compared to the time. So these are some instruments. The northern star. This was the very prominent thing at that time. The northern star. They used to measure it in their hands. A 60-degree angle of hands was used to measure the northern star. This northern star gives us navigation as well as time reading. Medieval Egyptians used the obelisk, the tower which was seen, and the modern Egyptians sundial. Not only as the Egyptians, but as for the other civilizations also, they had some different types of time calculations. The Indians, we had this Samay Chakra or something like that, which can be seen in Sanchi Stupa. So this was also a type of sundial. And the Greeks or the Inca civilization, they used finger measurement for time. They would stand up on their pyramids and they used to measure the time as shown. 15 minutes, 30, 45 hours and 1 minute. So in competition to that, the Egyptians created one more type of clock, which was known as the water clock. There was a bucket full of water which had a hole and one more bucket beneath it. So if the water would take half an hour to fill the below bucket, that means the time being situated, it was like somewhat like an hourglass, sand clock, somewhat like that, based on water measurement. These were the pyramids on which they used to measure. Islamic way of considering time. Isn't it fascinating that we use lunar calendars? Islamic months changed by lunar calendars. As for Surah Al-As, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Wal-As, by the time. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala swears by the time. And isn't it mentioned in the Quran that Shahru Ramadan alladhi unzila fihi al-Quran? We sent down the book of Quran in the holy month of Ramadan. Month of Ramadan. Is that time? Then the night of decree, Laylatul Qadr, and the night of ascension, Laylatul Mi'raj. These are also mentioned in the Quran, and this shows how important the time is according to Islam. In Surah Fussilat, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that I have created the earth in 2 days, and whatever is in it has been created in 4 days, altogether 6 days. In Surah Araf, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that night and day belong to me, and I wish to change it or not. So, as we know, Muslims had a golden age type of. So, in that golden age, there was a scientist, Al-Jazari, in the 13th century, who invented the first Muslim inventional clock, elephant clock. This was somewhat like the water clock. He designed it in such a way that it shows the diversion of the whole world. Elephant from India, the dragon from Chinese civilization, some of the Egyptian god pictures, and the architecture of an Islamic system. So this was a symbol of royalty and finance. Next came the sand clock. Sand clock is still used. It can be of many measurements like 1 minute or maybe 1 hour too. So these are some of the devices used before the clock. The North Star. North Star was also used by the sailors. Mostly sailors on sea voyages use this North Star. Sundial, as we have seen, water clock, obelisk, solar calculation, the Inca civilization did in their field. They used to measure the time left for sunset. If the sun is setting, evening fall. Then they used to measure how many minutes are remaining. Then the elephant clock and the sand clock. So the invention of clock in 14th century. 14th century, the mechanism of clock got influenced, and in 1656 the pendulum clock was invented by Christian Eugenes. So this pendulum clock was the very first type of invention of a working clock. Then in the 90s and 80s we got the digital clock as well as alarm clocks and this wall clock. Quartz wall clock mostly. Then in the 20th we have this wristwatch and now smartwatches. Jazakallah. Any questions?